Paper X are basically everybody's favorite team to watch. They're certainly my favorite team to watch. And so, like many people, it makes me kind of sad when they don't win tournaments. I wanted to just kind of go over some of their games and highlight some of the patterns of play style that I've seen that I think are problematic. And one of the reasons why they struggle to like win tournaments, because obviously this team has been very close several times, and it always seems to be like they get right to that line of winning a tournament and then they fall just short. And it's sad. Like, I would love to see this team win. And so I guess I just wanted to give that as like a caveat, because I am not going to be flaming the team. The narrative since they lost at Master Shanghai has been like, oh, does this team need to make changes? Who's the problem? Is it the coach? Is it this player? Is it this player? Is it this player? And I don't think that any of that is true. I think that's super reactionary. I still think that Paper X has the potential to be one of, if not the best team in the world, but I do think that they're making a couple of mistakes. So the first of those things is that I think it would be very disingenuous to not talk about Sky, because Sky has really just kind of been like the cornerstone of Paper X all through 2023. If you go back to 2023 in the statistics, you will see that Paper X played Sky on almost every single map. Obviously, Lotus Sky, Pearl Sky, Fracture Sky. Not so much on Breeze, but they don't really play Breeze, and they're not very good at Breeze. Icebox is kind of a default comp. They were even running Sky on Ascent for a bit there. Split, they obviously run Sky. Haven, they were running Sky. Bind, they run Sky. And so I think the Sky nerfs have really hurt Paper X maybe more than other teams and more than people are giving them credit for, because this has always been a team that likes to run, double duelist. And when you run a double duelist comp, you often have to sacrifice some other maybe more important or like more utility based type of agent. And for Paper X, they often just go with the initiator. And so while a lot of other teams are running double initiator plus like an info sentinel, Paper X tends to run a single initiator, sometimes no info sentinel, and they end up with just one character that's kind of responsible for gathering information about the map and what's going on in the round. And that's fine as long as your playstyle is built around that. And Paper X has built their playstyle around, W gaming. Everybody knows them for being a W gaming team. They go fast, they plant quickly, they play super aggressive, even on the defensive side. And because of that style of play, it doesn't really matter that they don't have, a ton of information in their roster. However, in 2024, post Sky nerfs, lacking information, I think, is a huge part of why we're seeing them struggle. And kind of just like overall, the utility density of their agent compositions is one of the biggest problems that they have. Sky lost the ability to regenerate her flashes, which are her kind of like easiest to use informational tool. And so you only get 2 flashes plus the dog. And then if you have seekers, that's, your informational kit. For Paper X, it seems like they still run the Sky quite a bit, but also on maps where they don't run the Sky, sometimes they just don't even really have like info a lot of the time, or the info tools that they have are a little bit less reliable, for example. One thing that Paper X has in spades and always has had is mechanical skill. And so I think they kind of have skated by past teams that are worse than them purely off of mechanics and teams making mistakes against their aggressive style. But when they get to the later stages of a tournament, like against 100 Thieves or G2, or, for example, in the past against like an Energy or a Fnatic or an EG last year, these teams that have the ability to kind of like control the pace of the round and slow Paper X down and stall them out and force them to play a longer round, Paper X is running out of steam, they're running out of utility, and they're running out of information, most importantly, so that they end up having to do very risky things and gamble a lot, which is a lot more exploitable for these better teams to do. So Breeze is one of their worst maps, and so we're not going to spend a lot of time looking at this, but I do think that this map is very like indicative of kind of like the problems that PaperX has. This is not a great map for Jing to play Raze on, and so as a result, they have Jing playing the Reyna. You basically have like no utility to help the team other than like a Lear here or there, but oftentimes that's kind of like a selfish use. So if we just look at their team, right, they have a Sova who has a recon dart and a drone, and that's it. That's all the information they have. They don't have a sentinel. They don't have a second piece of informational utility. They just have a Sova. And so what that means, PaperX being on defense, is that they have to get very aggressive on the map. So basically, because of their comp, they have to play aggressive, because if they don't, if they just kind of like sit in spawn, if they have 5 players just kind of sitting in spawn, they don't know what's going on, right? You know, they can send out a recon dart to middle, for example, and then it scans a couple of times, and then that's it. And then they just don't know what's going on the map. Whereas a team that's running a Cypher, for example, you know, they have a trip here. So if the attackers come B, the Cypher doesn't even have to be there. They'll know. Or they could have a trip here. They could have a trip here. They could have a trip here. And all these things help them hold parts of the map without having to worry about it, right? But PaperX has to worry about the entire map for the entire round. And what that means is that they basically have to make the map as small as possible, as quickly as possible, because otherwise the other team's going to be able to kind of like push and pull them across the map and force mistakes. So let's go ahead and look at the very first rifle round that they play. And we're going to see just kind of what I'm talking about initially. So the first move that PaperX makes is they try to basically like take this part of middle, because if they can remove this part of middle as something that they have to worry about initially, then all they really have to worry about is like the mains, right? The 2 mains, and that's a little bit more manageable. But obviously, Reyna being Reyna and Harbor being Harbor, these are 2 characters that don't really provide anything of value after the utility is thrown, as far as like, you know, information and holding space. So we can see that Jing migrates up here, and then the rest of the team basically just kind of like falls back to the back site because they don't have control of anything. And it's very hard for them to control anything because they just don't have the tools to do so. They have very little utility to hold anything. And so you can see that they basically have just gambled, right? They've gambled. They moved this Reyna over here. Jing has just continued to go this direction. And now they end up with 2 people on site in the far, far back of site. Because, I mean, Jet doesn't have any stalling utility. Harbor doesn't have any stalling utility. And so they have to just give up the entire front of the site. So in the first, like, 10 seconds of the round, they've lost control of all of this, right? They just don't have any control of the map, and they don't have any way to stall the attackers from hitting the site. So we're going to see 100 Thieves basically just kind of send it in, and PaperX has to rely on their aim to basically bail them out of the situation. And in this case, you know, it's going to go well. Like, they are going to bail themselves out. But I just wanted to showcase that example of, like, this is sort of what the comp forces them to do. This is how they have to play. And again, I want to just emphasize, this is their worst map. Like, they don't play this map very often. So a lot of the stuff that they do is probably kind of half-baked and not very good. But it's a good sort of like microcosm of the overarching problems that I see with their team. So rifle versus rifles, again, we see the Reyna and the Harbor working towards middle, and, you know, something peeks back into space that has been kind of cleared by the attackers and dies. And everybody can look at this and be like, well, that's pretty dumb. Like, why is he just peeking alone and getting one tapped into space that they don't have? But the answer is that, what else is he supposed to do? His Sova's on the other side of the map. His Reyna's in middle. Harbor doesn't have any informational or like utility to help him take the space. And they have to know if somebody's in A main, right? They have to know if people are here, because if people are in A main, then they need to call the rotations over. So the only way to get that information is for Jet to peek into it. And so basically, by the nature of their comp and how they're playing, they absolutely have to make this play. And so something dies, Now they're in a 5v4. Like, the round is very hard to win from here on out. And you can just kind of see, like, the positioning of these characters, right? Harbor just alone in the backside. If 100 Thieves were to hit A, they instantly lose the site, and there's nothing they can do about it. And then these two players have just stacked up and are trying to take elbow. But realistically, if we look at what map Control Paper X has, it's like this, their own spawn, and a tiny little bit of middle, right? So the rest of the map is 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves controls like literally everything else, which is very, very scary when you're on defense. If you've just given up like all of this space, like literally all of this space could be occupied by enemies, and there's really no way for Paper X to know where anybody is. So as this round plays out, again, the Sova is in spawn. So how else are they supposed to get information other than dry peeking into an angle? And 100 Thieves realizes that this is a problem with Paper X's comp. They have to dry peek things to clear stuff, because you simply can't like sit there and not know what's going on the map. The only way you can really win a round is by gathering information. And so Paper X is gathering information in the only way that their comp allows them to, which is basically just like dry clearing angles. So again, it's just, you know, it's a huge problem that makes them look really bad, but is brought on by the comp that they're playing. Let's go to the next rifle round. It's now 4-1, and Paper X gets out an operator. So an operator can be a decent way to somewhat fill the holes that you have in your defense, because it allows you, you know, to kind of treat Jet as a sentinel to some extent. You know, Jet just holds the line with the dash to escape, and Jet kind of just becomes like a turret that can actually kill people. And Paper X makes the adjustment to put 3 people on B. I would say this is probably a better approach than doing a 2-1-2 on this map in particular with their comp, because one of the things that I've talked about in a recent video, and one of the things that I think Paper X has kind of struggled with quite a bit this season, is this idea of like a strong side and a weak side of the map. You want the site that your enemies are attacking into to be strong. You want it to have as many players as possible. And so you have to kind of like either gamble, as Paper X is doing in this case. They're basically just gambling. Okay, they're probably going to come B. Let's have 3 players here. Or you have to, you know, get information and then make the rotations so that you have a strong site. So, you know, something that a team with more information would have, let's say this is like a KO instead of a harbor. I know that's kind of like a weird change to make. But let's just say this is a KO. If KO can knife this and the knife hits nothing, then they can immediately move this Jet over here, right? Because they're not coming A. The strong side, weak side part of the game is so important, because if 5 players are constantly hitting 2 players or 1 player on a site, you just can't hold the site and you're going to lose the game. So in this case, Paper X has 3 players here. They're rotating more people over, and they end up, you know, basically just fighting it out. So this is probably the best opportunity they've had to win a round up to this point. And it's because they've had like the right people in the right spot. Obviously, it doesn't go their way in this case, but it was certainly better than some of the previous rounds where they basically just got run over and died super early and had no idea what was going on in the round. And also, if teams are fast hitting into Paper X, it kind of plays into their game style, because Paper X would prefer it if you could just like fight them immediately, because then they don't have to worry about what's going on the map. They thrive on maps that are a little bit more like congested, where they can kind of just like play aggressive, take the space. There isn't a ton of space to hold, so they don't get punished as much for not having sentinels and not having lots of informational tools. But the slower maps, the ones that require them to kind of like feel out the round, or they have to kind of respond to what their opponents are doing as their opponents feel out the round, are ones that they kind of struggle on. I can feel Alex. I can imagine that it can be a little bit frustrating to watch your team play when it seems like they're just constantly having to take tons of chances. But I also think it's kind of like by nature of their play style and the comps that they pick that they have to do this. But you can see this is a little bit better from Paper X, a little bit more proactive. They instantly dart here and they instantly push out A. So this is kind of how they have to play at all times, because now that they've done this in the first 2 seconds of the round, they know that the map that they have to worry about is basically this, right? This is all fine. They don't have to worry about the A side of the map. All they have to worry about is middle and B. So this is the ideal way to play an aggressive comp. This is the way that you want kind of all of your rounds to go. When you don't have, you know, a sentinel or a bunch of informational tools, is you have to just kind of like get information via elimination of possibilities. And so we're going to see that kind of immediately. And, you know, they have kind of, again, this Jet playing as like a pseudo sentinel on the B side of the map. You get a pick, and then you can kind of fall out. And, you know, another thing that Paper X has definitely kind of struggled with, seemingly, is like the discipline of when to not take the fight. In this case, it is good discipline, and you can kind of see the rewards of that. They get the player advantage, they keep the player advantage, they wait for their teammates to get here, and then they can kind of make something happen. Obviously, kind of unlucky there. Asuna kind of pops off, and they lose an unfortunate trade, basically, where 100 Thieves just kind of goes crazy. But they've given themselves at least the chance to win. You know, another kind of unfortunate part of this comp, and again, this is, you know, not a map that they play that often, so the comp is probably not optimized, but their retake utility is not very good, right? Viper has no utility, can't really help retake. Sova has no utility, can't really help retake. Reyna has no utility, can't really help retake. No Leers. I mean, obviously there's 2 Devours, but who cares about that? So how are they supposed to retake with this comp? If a wall goes up, they just have to dry face through it. They just have to run through. So again, the utility density is a huge problem in a lot of their comps. Let's go to a map that they actually win. We're going to go to Sunset next. And this is sort of like to contrast to that Breeze comp, where this is Paper X's best map. Okay, Sunset has been their best map. And my theory of why this has been their best map is because the comp that they're running actually enables their play style. So this comp is quite a bit different than, you know, Reyna, Jet, Viper, Harbor, and Sova, because we have 2-ish informational characters. You could say maybe even 3, kind of, to some extent. Sage Wall can kind of be an informational tool. Gecko obviously has tons of information that is reusable. And then Raze even has an informational tool in Boombot and the ability to clear angles and stuff with Nade and Showstopper as well. So they actually have a decent amount of ability to like clear the map as they need to. And I think one of the more interesting things about this comp is both of the aggressive players, Jing and Something, are on characters that can kind of self-enable and self-clear and gather information alone. Okay, so yes, Gecko tends to be more of like a supportive character, but the way that Something plays it, it's very much a duelist, but it's a duelist that can find enemies and can clear parts of the map and like allow him to kind of interpret the game correctly. And then on top of that, they've got 3 characters that can help set up their duelists, but also have the ability to dump a bunch of utility into post-plant situations and also into stalling people out when they're playing defense. So I think that this comp actually fits very, very well with Paper X's playstyle, because not only do the aggressive parts of it kind of like synergize well together and also self-enable, but their defense has a lot more tools for gathering information. And they also have the ability to kind of like reinforce and keep the space that they take. Whereas, you know, the previous comp that we looked at had no ability to do that. It's a fairly like straightforward game plan, right? We've got an aggressive comp. Let's explode onto the site. Let's plant the spike as quickly as possible. And let's play post plant with our utility. And this is kind of just like their general ethos of how they play the game. And it's, you know, it's fun to watch, but also definitely has some problems from time to time. So in this case, we're going to see that 100 Thieves does a pretty good job of counter utiling, right? So the initial explosion from Paper X gets kind of stalled out because the Asuna Raze uses Showstopper to try and push them back, and they have 3 players here already, so they're able to throw some utility and smoke stuff up and kind of secure the A site. And now what does PaperX do? Well, unfortunately for them, because they've stacked 5 players at A, they don't really have any other options. They can't go to B. They can't go through middle because they don't have any map control. And this is definitely something that I've noticed that PaperX have been doing a huge amount this year, is that they are always as 5, like almost always. They're just as 5 hitting into a site. And if that initial hit doesn't work, then they have a very hard time pivoting to the other site because they just don't have any map control. And so you'll see the times that they win a lot, it's either this initial attack gets value, gets a player advantage, and they're able to kind of like snowball that into a round win. Or specifically last year, they would always have somebody lurking. You know, they would have an Astra over here or a Killjoy lurking up middle or something like that. They always had this other player in a pivot position. The best way to describe this is you've got like your core. This is your aggressive core, and it's going to have like an initiator probably. It's going to have your duelist. It's probably going to have it might have a smokes, it might have both initiators, it might have both duelists, and this is going to go try and take space aggressively. But then you want to have a pivot position so that when this gets stopped, because if the other team has 3 or 4 players there and they counter your initial hit, you want to be able to swing that momentum back to the other side of the map, but it's very hard to do that unless you have control to do that around. So anyway, PaperX basically just has to kind of like muscle their way onto A site, and so I think they will end up winning this round. But again, you can see it's like they get stalled out, and their only play is to just like sit here. Okay, let's just sit here. Let's refight. Sit here. Let's refight. It's kind of one-dimensional. It's kind of a one-dimensional approach. But right now, it's all they have because they're just playing as 5 and trying to hit the A site constantly. And so here, I mean, realistically, they should lose this round because 100 Thieves knows what's going on. So 100 Thieves, they've got all 3 people here. And the only reason that they don't lose this round is that Bang gets caught in the middle of like a peak and he's still moving. And so he whiffs his shot. But realistically, you play this scenario out like 20 times and he probably kills Devi here, like 19 of them. So kind of an unfortunate timing for him there. And then this could very easily be 2 or even 3 kills for EU. And he just happens to do damage to 2 people and not kill either of them. So that round probably should be a PaperX loss, and they kind of get away with it just because of luck, and also their aim is like maybe a little bit more on point at the time. So then 100 Thieves calls a timeout, and you're going to see 100 Thieves makes an instant adjustment. They put 3 people at A. PaperX has only shown that they're hitting A so far, so they decide, okay, let's make sure that they cannot fight us here. PaperX decides to also switch things up a little bit. They play a little bit of a slower round.
Sort of a mid tiles push for the side of PaperX, looking for a little bit of space, looking for a little bit of info.
And this is something that PaperX did a lot in 2023 when I think they were probably at their peak in terms of performance, is that they would play these very aggressive rounds, but they also had the ability to kind of slow the game down and like allow their opponents to get paranoid. And this is kind of what you see here a little bit, is that they've given 100 Thieves enough time to interpret the round incorrectly, right? They had 3 people at A, they threw the dizzy, they got no information, they had no information B, they have to dedicate people to middle because they think PaperX is maybe going to come through B or middle, and PaperX is then able to capitalize on the 100 Thieves being out of position by going A. But it's still difficult, right? That very easily could have been 2 kills with the judge. And again, they have all 5 players here. So if they did want to do something else, they can't, right? They basically can't. So they get actually shut down, and now they have to like scramble to get over to B site. It feels very messy. If this was PaperX of 2023, they would have had somebody here. That person probably would have caught the lurk, and they would have pivoted with 4 players to B instantly. Okay, so now 100 Thieves goes even more all in. They're on a rifle buy finally, and they decide to put 4 players at A. Okay, PaperX has gone A 6 rounds in a row. What are we going to do? Let's put 4 players at A and let's stop their momentum instantly. We have the ability to do this because we have Cypher stuff that can hold B. So here we go. Paper Rex tries to force the issue at A. Again, you know, Paper Rex makes some great plays, hits some great shots. And in this case, they're actually able to do this pivot because they had 2 people over towards B. So 3 players get kind of stuck over here for 100 Thieves. Paper Rex pivots, and then they're able to maybe force the issue onto B site. But they get stalled out here as well. And now is where things get really, really weird, because they've expended a lot of utility to go A main. They've expended a utility to go B main. And both of them have kind of been stopped. And so now at this point, they're basically just like scrambling to get onto the site because they've used all of their utility. And their only option is just to continue pressing forward. We have to just keep going forward. We have to go forward. We have to go forward because we don't have any utility and we don't have any control of the site. So in that case, 100 Thieves is able to just fight through that and outfight them eventually. And now is where things start to go a little bit south for Paper Rex. Because now they've been stopped. Now they're going to go back to just like slamming the A site, but 100 Thieves is ready for it. 100 Thieves has 4 players here. You know, they just got rewarded for this play before, so 100 Thieves is going to continue to do the same thing. So let's see how it works out for Paper Rex in this case.
Look at this stack on A.
We've seen how much damage Busio could do with this in the past.
And this is like a very 2024 Paper Rex move where, you know, they start out with somebody kind of spread, but then they very quickly give up that map control and just group as 5. And so at the end of the day, they're still just doing like a 5-stack hit, but it's delayed by, you know, 20 or 30 seconds. So they just wait out this first little bit. They try to create a little bit of paranoia for the other team. And then they're just going to go ahead and try to explode into the A site. But again, you'll notice that they don't really have a pivot option. They don't really have the ability to go back B if this doesn't work. So it's very, very all in. And 100 Thieves knows that there is nobody B. They are 100% sure that this is an A hit because they have a Cypher cam, a tripwire, and a Cypher that is watching this. So 100 Thieves is able to put 4 players at A, and they know that because Paper Rex hasn't done anything else on the map, it must be an A hit. So again, 100 Thieves in position. They counter util as Paper Rex uses all of their util. And now what is Paper Rex supposed to do? It's like, we're a minute into the round and Paper Rex has 5 people in their spawn still because their initial hit didn't work. So what is their option? Well, we can't really go re-clear the rest of the map because, I mean, look at their agents, right? This is not an informational agent. This is not an informational agent. Obviously, Sage can be informational on defense with the wall, but on offense doesn't really help clear anything. And then they don't have a Boombot anymore. They don't have Thrash currently. Their Dizzy's on cooldown. How are they supposed to go re-clear the map? They can't. So all they can do is just sit at A site and then re-hit A site, which is what they're going to do. He will fall. Still though. Quick rotate back as EU gets himself in a position to continue this contest alongside Cryo. Crash at the ready, sent around the corner looking for the detain. But it's just so messy. Every round just feels so hard. It feels like they're working so hard because people have finally figured out, okay, Paper Rex is going to play aggressively. They're always going to play aggressively. All they do is play aggressively. And so if we can just be at the right place at the right time to throw counter utility and stop that initial aggression and not give them map control, then they don't have any utility to continue playing the round afterwards. So we'll watch one more of these and then we'll go to the defensive side. So this time Paper Rex has realized, okay, well, we've tried, 8 rounds in a row to A and it's starting to not work. Let's go to B. And again, they don't have any control outside of A. They don't have like a sentinel lurking here. They don't have a smokes player lurking there or anything because their Omen is part of their like attack core with the paranoia. And so they end up with just 5 people outside of B. And again, we're going to see the same thing from 100 Thieves, which is that, they basically just have to like send a Jing in to try and take space aggressively. But there's 4 players here for 100 Thieves. And it does go well for Paper Rex this time. But again, it's very like coin flippy. There's just as much chance that Cryocells gets 3 kills there as Forsaken gets 3 kills there. So yes, it does work, but it's very, very high variance. I want to show some positive stuff as well, because I've just kind of been harping on the same stuff for the last like 25 minutes. So I want to show the opposite side of this. I want to show the kind of like correct way to play these types of comps that PaperX does, which is with a lot more proactivity.
Look at what 100 Thieves is doing. They expect something like what I was just talking about.
So
Some kind of
PaperX,
combo play.
maybe it's one more round after this actually. Yeah, this is clearly not a proactive round. So I guess again we can see PaperX like giving up all of the mains, right? 100 Thieves can just get into the mains for free.
The Showstopper and a Nightfall potentially are going to come through to counter it, so they have to be.
They have no idea what's going on the map. They have no camera, no trips, no bots.
Shown tremendous reaction to what PaperX wants to
30 seconds into the round, PaperX has no idea where anybody is. And so they have 3 players just stacked here, one person just holding here, one person holding here super passively. There's no way that they're stopping 100 Thieves from getting on the site.
Without a traditional sentinel, don't have a lot of map control.
And yes, they do have good retake tools with all these ults, but this is not going to be that common of a thing where you have 5 ults to retake, right? So we get into a crazy situation. It's again just going to be a massive scramble, like a billion ults being used, tons of utility just being dumped into like a small area of the map to try and retake, and it's just not going to work out for PaperX. So now let's go look at the positive side of things. So now let's go look at the proactivity side of things. So immediately we see PaperX kind of like rededicate themselves to taking B main. We have to start knowing where the other team is, otherwise it's very, very hard to play the game. So they play proactive in B. This is probably too aggressive from Jing to take this fight, but now look what's happening. They're actually pushing. They're actually taking space on the opposite side of the map because 100 Thieves has been giving them cues. Hey, we're at A. So now that they've cleared all of B, now they can feel more comfortable rotating towards A. Now they kind of have an idea what's going on the map. So something, you know, pushing, continuing to push. This is what he does very well when PaperX is playing well, is he gets very proactive. He gets very, very aggressive with his position. Because now, look at this. What map control does 100 Thieves have? Just their spawn, right? What map control does PaperX have? The rest of the map. So now PaperX knows, they know where 100 Thieves is. It makes it much easier for them to play. And so PaperX is going to end up stacking towards A. They get some nice kills.
Here we go again. Wall boost up. Outlaw in hand here for Forsaken.
Kind of a silly play from PaperX.
Creep up here. The tiles from Boostio.
But now they're going to fall off. And again, they kind of go for like an instant gamble. And I think they end up winning this round as well, but it's just like, I can't emphasize this enough. These types of setups where you're just fully giving up one side of the map and you have no idea if anybody is there is just so high variance. Like, it's not a surprise to me that this team has a lot of ups and downs. And if you kind of extrapolate that idea, right? The better teams you play later on in tournaments are going to exploit this stuff. And also, because you're gambling so often, you must surely be feeling some sort of anxiety. You must surely be feeling the pressure because, holy shit, we just gave up all of A site for free. We have no idea where the other team is. Like, the later on in a tournament that gets, the more that pressure is going to get to you, the more often you're going to make mistakes. And if you're playing in a way that's like constantly putting you in these situations where you are going to be anxious because you're gambling, or like you're forced to gamble by the comp that you're playing or the way that you're playing, it just makes sense why PaperX has a hard time closing out these tournaments and winning these tournaments.
Drifting his way forward down into mid. Not to be able to intercept anybody though, as Wingman doesn't go deep enough to reveal Asano's position. So for now, something, only person on this side of the map, but everyone starts working their way forward.
Again, the proactivity being rewarded, right? This round could go extremely badly for Paper X based off of their positioning. But Jing has done the correct thing. He's pushed down middle. He's cleared a bunch of angles. He's going to be on the quick flank. He's going to confirm that they are A. Right? Obviously, if somebody's over here and shoots him in the back, then this is a lost round, most likely. But the proactivity gets rewarded in this case. And of course, we get to see Jing pop off. So you get lots of those moments from Paper X, but there's also so many opportunities for it to go wrong. So let's go to the last map against 100 Thieves. This is going to be Icebox. This has actually kind of surprisingly been one of Paper X's better maps. But I think actually if you look at the comp, it kind of makes sense. Because in this comp, the standard comp, we've got a Sentinel who has informational tools. We've got another Sentinel who has the ability to reinforce the post plant and help us plant. We've got a Initiator who has the ability to get information and post plant utility as well. We've got good post plant utility from the Viper as well. So this comp actually has like a lot of the things that Paper X wants in a comp, because if they're playing on the attack side and they plant quickly, they want to be able to play post plant with all of their mollies and stuff like that. And if they're on defense, they have a lot of tools to hold space passively so that they have some idea of what's going on the round. So here we go. We're going to the attack side. We're going 5 into A.
Slow Orb trying to deny these tanks. They know Asana is going to want to try to collect them, get that Thrash online as quickly as
But again, I do want to point out the thing where there's nobody towards B. There's nobody lurking middle. So if this A hit doesn't work, they lose the round, right? So the A hit has to work. It's very, very all in. And 100 Thieves is doing a great job of being proactive. Look at this push from the Viper, the push through middle. So if we look at, 100 Thieves, they control all of this, right? They have so much map control. They know Paper X has to be here. Exactly.
So good. Get these players out of the back of sight.
There's a Dizzy. Also not going to be spotted. Tucks himself over onto the right-hand side behind the box, and Forsaken is just getting ripped to pieces. Taken down, something able to reply back.
So now we're in a spot where Paper X basically just has to shoot their way out of it, and it's not going to go well for them, just because it was too easy. It was too easy for the defenders to be in the right spot at the right time. It's too much pressure on these players to just be able to hit every shot, because if they don't, then they lose. And now they're just still stuck at A. So again, Paper X does have a little bit of an anchor point, but they give it up almost immediately. So it is going to be pretty all in, and you can just see 100 Thieves. They know how Paper X is playing, right? They just know if they can just beat them to the site with numbers, they can make it very hard for Paper X. But Paper X is going fast. They get the opening kill. And this is how Paper X wins a lot of their rounds, especially with the better, more balanced comps. They get that initial kill. They're going to get the spike down super early. And then they have just all this fortification for their post plant, right? They've got the wall, they've got mollies, they've got an alarm bot watching their flank. So they can just put a bunch of guns on like Snowman specifically, and they have quite a bit of utility left to defend the spike plant, right? They've got a molly, they've got another molly, and then they've got a res as well, so they can fight aggressively. So now let's go look at round 12. This will be the last example from the attack side, because this illustrates one other point that I have about this team, which is that because everybody knows that they're going to play aggressive, like, it's been, 2.5 years of just like hyper aggressive play style from Paper X, and specifically the last year or so with something has been just non-stop aggression all the time. Teams are getting better at stopping their aggressive play style. They know it's coming, and that means that Paper X has to throw more utility to actually take the site, because if they don't sort of like really heavily molly out the site, if they don't throw all of their flashes, if they don't dump all of their utility into an execute, then the other team is going to be ready. And you can see this, like Paper X makes noise B, and 100 Thieves literally rotates 5 players to B because they just know Paper X is all inning every single round. Okay, so if Paper X wants to plant the spike here, they have to use all of their utility. There's no way they can take the site unless they use all of their utility. So fragment gets used, slow gets used, wall gets used, flash gets used, mollies get used. And now let's just take a quick look at their utility, right? KO has no utility. Viper has 1 molly. Killjoy, no mollies. Sage, obviously no real utility. They have 1 slow left. So contrast this to, you know, a team that maybe has been able to get onto the site without having to use quite as much utility. They might have 2 mollies left. They might have a nano swarm even on top of that. And so they're able to just kind of like, you know, slowly bleed out the timer and let the spike explode. But now Paper X, because they have no utility, they have to use this lockdown. And they're also kind of stuck in the positions that they're in, because Forsaken has had to use all of his flashes to get control of the site. And so he feels like he has to play kind of aggressive, you know? He feels like he has to continue to hold the space, because if they get pushed off the space, they can't delay the spike plant. And the spike plant is kind of bad because they got pushed off the initial spike plant. So there's just a lot of problems where Paper X are kind of putting themselves in positions where they have to play aggressively all the time, even on their post plants, because they just don't have the utility to win the round after they've planted the spike. And again, like, they have the mechanics to win these rounds, right? A lot of the times Jing's going to win that. A lot of the times EU's not going to win both duels there. But if Paper X just had mollies on the spike, then they don't even have to take the duels in the first place. They don't even have to give 100 Thieves the opportunity to try and win the round, right? Let's go to round 15. Just as one more example of why not having proactivity can really cause you some problems. So now we have 100 Thieves on attack, Paper X on defense, and 8 seconds into the round, how much map control do Paper X have? Right? They have no idea what's happening in A main. They barely have any idea what's happening in B main. They have no mid control. It's going to be a very hard round, I can promise you that. So 100 Thieves is going to end this round. Now what do we do? Well, they start to get a little bit more proactive. They get something on a line. They've got the operator here. And they tag people over here. So they decide to rotate into a 4-1. Okay. Again, very, very gambly, but it's good. You want as many players at the point of attack as possible.
Still back yellow, unaccounted for. Forsaken playing so close.
And he is. Dangerous position, and as he swings, Cryo shuts it down. Mind Freak just sat here quietly.
But now you can see Paper X feeling more and more uncomfortable about the round. Something has fallen back. Generator. We're playing Boiler. Again, we don't have any map control, right? So we lost a player here. We know that there's players B, but suddenly we don't have any control of A. So they could be coming back A, and we don't know. And we don't have any control of mid. So they could be coming middle, and we won't really know. They could be in tube. Like, there's lots of places that the attackers could be. And again, this is where they have to be proactive. If they're not proactive, it's going to be very, very hard to control this map. And I think this is kind of why they struggle on these bigger maps a lot of the times against good teams, is that they end up in these spots where they just have like no map control and they're not being proactive enough, so they get outmaneuvered by good IGLs.
They've got the reads. It's going to come down to the shooting. Dizzy over the top.
Doesn't get cleared out, but now took a shift back here. 100 Thieves starting to rotate.
30 seconds.
And just like this, you know, 100 Thieves, they're able to force Paper X to gamble. Now they're going to move back over here. And just imagine if something had actually just been up here the whole time. If he had maintained an aggressive angle, or when his teammates were fighting over at B, if he'd pushed all the way up to here like we sometimes see Jets do and take this line. This is an entirely different round because all of a sudden they have full information of A, and they know that 100 Thieves is stuck here. But because that didn't happen, because something didn't feel comfortable pushing up to this spot, they're completely screwed on this round. 100 Thieves is going to be able to take the site for free, and now PaperX is retaking with like no utility and an operator, and it's just going to be super hard. PaperX calls a timeout, and they decide that instead of trying to play like a more passive start to the round, we're just going to go 4-1. We're just going to stack 4A. We're going to put our info character towards B. But in my opinion, it's still not proactive enough, right? Because they just kind of like feel this out and then they fall off. And again, now they're just in their spawn again. They've given up the early part of A. They don't really have good mid control. And 100 Thieves has guessed correctly in this case, and they're just hitting B. And so they're in a 4-1. It's already a gamble. If 100 Thieves guesses correctly, the round is over. If they don't guess correctly, PaperX is not really presenting any sort of resistance at A either, and they're just kind of like freely giving up map control. PaperX again, they're going to try and gamble a bit. It's going to be a 3-1-1 this time. And we'll see if they get proactive on the A side or not.
It doesn't really find any impact, and it feels like PaperX is starting to crumble.
Okay, hopefully they come B because this is where we're strongest. They are able to get that first blood. It seems like PaperX has like kind of figured out the defense a little bit, right? They won a bunch of rounds in a row, and they figured out that, okay, if we can stack, so they tried, they were in 2-on-2, it wasn't working. Then they went to a 4-1. It was kind of working, but not consistently, and they ended up going to a 3-1-1, which worked a little bit better. And so they won some rounds. But then PaperX is back in like a 2-2-1. They've decided to go back to what was not working at the very beginning of the map on defense. And you're going to see a very similar situation to what we saw when they were losing all those rounds on defense, which is that, 10 seconds into the round, we've got 4 people in their spawn. We have no map control A. We have no map control B. We've got some map control middle thanks to our turret. But it's really, really, really hard to play the game when you don't know what's happening on most of the map.
Catch him off guard.
Spots a jump across, and Busio swinging out, trying to get the catch. Something seeing two, relaying this. Couple rotations across the map here. Mind freaking Divide.
And you can just feel the hesitancy from them, right? They're trying to rotate, but they just don't know because they don't have any control of A. So it ends up where they just have 2 people on B trying to defend against 5 people. It's 13-12. They know their tournament life is on the line. If there wasn't that much pressure, if this wasn't such a huge game, if there weren't so many big stakes, maybe something and Mind Freak play this a little bit more carefully. Maybe they don't die here, but they feel the pressure, and so they go for the aggressive fight, and they lose the trade, right? 1-for-1 is like, yes, it's an even trade, but it's not good for the defenders. They need the jet, and they end up just getting stuffed on the retake, and Unfuse wins. Because they play this very like feast or famine type of play style, it works against worse teams. Against the better teams that don't give them that initial pick, if they don't have that accelerant into the round by getting a numbers advantage and being able to snowball that into the site, then they don't really have any other options. So like against a DFM, no offense to DFM, but against a DFM will just have like one player come here and die, and then PaperX will be able to just be like, okay, cool, now we're in a 5v4 and we can just take the site. But against a team like 100 Thieves will not give them that numbers advantage. And I think this is kind of just the thing. The later you go in tournaments, the better the teams get, the more careful the teams play against you. And so without that initial kill, you have to have some sort of like plan B, right? And I think their playstyle can work. I think it kind of shows on Sunset. Like their playstyle can work because they have the right tools on this map. So They have a few different options to get aggressive on this map. They have the ability to, again, I think the duelists being able to like self-facilitate and also kind of support their teammates is really important. And then they have the ability to fortify their plant, right? Because once the plant goes down, they're able to plant with the gecko, so they can be gun out with one of the best aimers in the game. They have redundant utility that he can pick up again and use over and over and over on that initial aggressive hit. And then they have so many post-plant tools because they've got, a sage wall that just makes it much harder to get in. They've got the slows for the choke. They've got the nade potentially or a rocket. They've got, a breach stun that comes back up to like stop the retake from happening. And then they've got, maybe a paranoia as well to again, just kind of like make it much, much harder for the other team to retake the site. And also they tend to be more proactive with this roster or with this agent comp on this map. Maybe it's because they take B main aggressively and then they can just wall and, they'll wall like this, for example, and then they can go kind of like shift their setup to be a lot more heavy towards one side of the map, knowing that they feel pretty comfortable like this. I think the biggest thing for me is that a lot of people are saying that like Paper X are like washed, that their players are not good, that they're playing too aggressively, that they're feeling too much pressure. They need a sports psychologist. Like there's so many things that people are like pointing to. But I think the biggest problem is like it kind of like stems from their comps not fitting their play style. I think they're putting themselves in situations where it's like too all in and their play style is too all in. And if it's going to be that all in, then you have to get the comp correct. And I think that they're trying to do a little bit of like, let's play meta stuff, but play all in. And so if you're going to play all in, you have to like really just go for it with the comp. Don't play the Omen, play something else. Don't play like whatever the common agent is maybe that you think you have to play something weird. Or also a little bit of like the play style stuff where maybe they just need to make sure that they always have somebody that they can like anchor and pivot around. And that also might require having a bit of a different agent. I think one of the things that like really stood out to me from watching their 2023 games is that oftentimes they had like a global agent. There was a ton of Mind Freak Astra or Mind Freak Viper or even like Forsaken Killjoy that was always on the lurk, always securing another part of the map, but still able to help their teammates, right? So like with the Killjoy, you can hold your teammates flank on attack, but you can also be aggressive over somewhere else. If you're playing an Astra, obviously you can help your team from across the map. If you're Viper, you can help your team from across the map while also securing map control with yourself. So yeah, I think right now what I'm seeing is just like too much all in from Paper X all the time. And teams just know, like if you see them at A, they are coming A because they don't have another option. If they're going to play hyper aggressive comps, if they're going to just 5-man hit a site, you have to be able to play post plant, right? You have to have utility left to play post plant because you're playing so aggressive that you're going to get the spike down instantly. But then if you don't have any utility to play afterwards, how are you going to keep how are you going to get the spike to explode? So if you're going to play hyper aggressive, you have to have post plant stuff. And if you're not going to play hyper aggressive, then you have to have information. It's kind of that simple.